Hey, how are we doing, everybody, and welcome into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we're going to be covering 5 wide receivers that I see as must-sit lineup options for this week, or players that we've got on the bust alert radar because of difficult matchups, because of injuries to quarterbacks or other key players in their given offenses. We've got reasons, we've got explanations, and we're going to talk about them in today's episode. If you're new around here, the SFS channel, make sure to click that subscribe button before we get into today's video, and leave today's episode with a like so others know you found today's episode helpful and useful for your fantasy teams this year. With that being said, we're not going to waste any more time. Let's hit the intro and get straight in to our first must-sit player here in Week 9. Alrighty, here we go, jumping right into things. Marvin Jones is our first must-sit wide receiver for this week's action. This one's simple for me, and Marvin Jones, as well as Laviska Shenault, were must-starts for me this past week. I expected them to be able to go out against a weak Seattle defense and produce quality numbers, and what I expected would be a game the Jaguars were capable of controlling. And it looked like on the opening drive, the opening possession, with James Robinson, the quick start he got off to, that was going to be the case. But man, if there was ever a time to see how valuable a player is to a given offense and their ability to be a balanced football team, we saw it with J-Rob. He gets injured early, leaves with a heel injury, and after that, this Jags team was a complete disaster, a mess. They were not able to move the football, got absolutely whopped 31-7. And this team couldn't throw the ball downfield because the running game was not up to par with what it would have been if J-Rob was in this lineup. Again, he started out the game fantastic, only got a few touches in before he had to leave this contest for good. Now he's day-to-day with an injury, and we'll talk about, we did talk about that in our episode with our must-sit running backs for this week. The basis upon sitting Marvin Jones stems deeper than just the fact that he might see some healthy amount of coverage from Tre'Davious White, which is one of the game's top corners, in one of the toughest matchups for any given wide receiver this season. It also has to do with the fact that Carlos Hyde could be the starting running back for this Bills team. If that's the case, you're going to see an even more extreme situation of what happened to the Jaguars in Week 8 with them not being able to play balanced football without James Robinson. You're not going to be able to run on the Bills any easier than you were able to run on the Seahawks. And if you're going to struggle to an even greater extent than you did last week, that's going to create a whole nother set of problems and make this an even tougher game for the Jaguars to move the football in any sense of the imagination. Now, yes, that might open the door for, if the Bills potentially stomp the Jags this week, that's going to give the opportunity for some garbage time yards and some easy completions late. But Marvin Jones wasn't able to capitalize on that last week, nor was Laviska Shenault. So here in an even tougher matchup without your team's best offensive player who really keeps this whole offense in check and helps them move the football on a consistent basis, get into third and manageable situations, I'm not starting my Jags this week. Probably not anybody. Unless James Robinson's out there, it's an iffy one. I've got him on bust alert for this week. I think that even if he's out there and available to play, this is a really tough front to score against, and I think the ceiling is a lot lower than we'd like it to be. Stay clear of your Jags here. Week 9 is a tough matchup for them. OBJ versus the Cleveland Browns taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, rather. Odell was surprisingly, I don't know if it was surprisingly, but his name was tossed around in trade rumors a lot. Now, I didn't necessarily expect that they were going to move him because I kind of think the Browns were a bit stubborn in this situation. But it was clearly evident that OBJ had some internal discussions with LeBron James himself and potentially his father as well, who were trying like heck to get him out of Cleveland, whether it's released, traded, any way to get OBJ on a different team where he can potentially get his career revamped. It's been a really rough season. He has not produced up to anyone's expectations. He plummeted in drafts all the way to the 5th round. And it was starting to become a situation where you go, well, is there value here? You've got a really good talent. He can make big plays, make a splash, an explosive impact in any given second. He hasn't been able to do that nearly at all this year. He hasn't topped 100 yards receiving in a contest this year. And he's got less than or equal to 27 yards receiving in 5 of his 7 starts this year. the production just isn't there. Whether it's the chemistry with Baker Mayfield, the play calling, whatever it is, it just hasn't clicked. Jarvis Landry is a borderline unstartable fantasy wide receiver option at this point, despite the massive target share he's been receiving the last 2 weeks. And he's got 18 of those, so averaging 9 per game since he's returned from his injuries. OBJ still isn't even competing with Jarvis Landry on his own team for target share or production. And again, Jarvis Landry has not quite put up fantasy starting numbers yet. Only 102 yards and 12 points in those 2 games that he's been back. Odell here against Cincinnati, less to do with matchup, honestly, than it is just losing faith in a situation and a player. And I think that if you aren't to this point already, it's safe to assume OBJ belongs on your bench at this point. I'd love to see him go somewhere else. I'd love to see him get this career restarted and kicked off somewhere else, because I think that he still has a lot of juice left in the tank, has a few more years of prime production, and could potentially become a big splash play threat for another team. But Baker isn't necessarily a game-changing quarterback. He's more of a game manager. I don't know if their skill sets line up too well together. And based off of what OBJ Sr. posted, it looks like Baker Mayfield often doesn't throw the football to Odell when he is open on the field. So that's a little concerning. So Odell Beckham Jr., a situation I would definitely, if you can find some way to trade him with his name value right now. Now, his fantasy stock is through the floor. It's virtually non-existent unless you can find like an 8-year-old in your leagues who thinks that OBJ is awesome because he saw a one-handed catch from him sometime. You're probably stuck here. But Odell, staying away from him at all costs in lineups, especially this week. Probably Jarvis Landry as well, but just want to touch on OBJ here in an episode. Christian Kirk against the San Francisco 49ers here, another wide receiver I'm sitting. Now, this one is more to do with Kyler Murray than it is with the actual matchup we're facing here. Kyler Murray sprained his ankle on the final drive against the Green Bay Packers this past week. That has more significance than I think a lot of people would realize at face value. Kyler Murray is a player who does a ton of damage, scrambling outside the pocket and making throws off balance, on the run, and on the move. Sprained ankles are going to limit your mobility. That's going to decrease the amount of speed, agility, and athleticism that he's able to put on display every given play. Kyler Murray's a very short quarterback. He is going to be more confined to the pocket now. What's in the pocket? Big trees of offensive linemen blocking your vision. Kyler's so effective because he has a great arm talent. He has elite athleticism. When he's able to move, get outside the pocket, he's able to find throwing windows and lanes to make these spectacular plays. And for a big play receiver, Christian Kirk is certainly not a volume receiver. That's going to hurt him a lot. That's going to put a major damper on what Christian Kirk's able to do this week, because I'm not really sure he's going to be able to do anything outside of Kyler Murray doing a 3-step or 5-step drop and hitting him on a simple fade pattern outside. I don't know if he's going to be able to really find much production outside of that this week. Again, a sprained ankle. If Murray's even able to play, that should be another thing prefaced, he could potentially be sat here with the Arizona Cardinals' current standing. Now, obviously, they don't want to lose the division lead right now that they have in the NFC West, but it is the potential that Colt McCoy might be the quarterback now. Again, that's nothing official. I think that Kyler Murray's going to try and battle through this injury, be out there on the field and available if at all possible. But we saw Kyler get injured last year. We saw him have some shoulder issues, and we saw his production reduced dramatically. That could be a similar situation here. Kyler's an excellent talent, but with his physical limitations from his height perspective, as simple as that might be, adding in an injury tends to really throw off the balance of what he's been able to do to this point in his career. And again, tracing back to last year, seeing the implications that had for his rest of fantasy season before he was really able to get healthy again this year, I don't like what that means for Christian Kirk, especially in this offense because of his value and predication along making deep plays downfield and being a playmaker for this team. And then Jakobi Meyers here. We talked about Damien Harris in our must-sit running backs episode for this week as a must-sit player. Obviously, Jakobi Meyers and every Pats pass catcher is going to be just that for the wide receiver segment. Nelson Agholor, Jakobi Meyers. This is one of the most difficult secondary matchups and overall defensive units to play against this season now. The Rams have seemingly made the massive jump. We're going to talk about them in just a second here in terms of their defensive ability to stop opposing offenses. But Carolina, man, their pass rush, their run stop, Their ability to cover downfield has really improved leaps and bounds this season. Jakobi Meyers in PPR leagues was already a lower-end flex play. He was more safety than he was upside. But this week, I think that it's going to be a tough, ugly, low-scoring game because I think the Panthers are going to do their part to slow down Mac Jones at a very effective rate. And I also think that you're going to see Sam Darnold on the other side of this matchup really struggle when Bill Belichick takes away his safety nets and safety blankets and forces him to beat them by making big plays downfield. Jakobi Meyers this week, you just talk about simply the pass rushers. They're going to get after Mac Jones quick. And then you talk about the secondary. You've got Stephon Gilmore back there who maybe won't shadow anybody and won't travel on the field to cover a certain individual player this week, but he is certainly one of the game's top corners still. Came out and made a pick in his first game with the Panthers last week. You've also got Dante Jackson back there, a very effective corner, and this is a team with A.J. Boye as well. So I think that you've got 3 deep corners right now, and you're talking about C.J. Henderson and J.C. Horn, your first-round pick this year, not being available and healthy to play. So you go 5 deep in the secondary with players who are very capable of being starting level players in this league and already having lower end upside wide receiver potential for this Pats offense. This is a situation, stay away from it this week. There's a lot of risk for very minimal reward. There's more likely a better boom or bust option that might suit your lineups better in week 9. And then A.J. Brown. I'm not going to go out here and say must sit A.J. Brown, but what I am going to say is a very, very strong bust alert. You've got a team transitioning from having the player who is quite arguably the most valuable individual athlete to their NFL team, Derrick Henry, out for potentially the remainder of the regular season, and now they have to transition to a different running back, a different situation. Whether it's Adrian Peterson, Jeremy McNichols, this run game is not going to be the same, and it's especially not going to be the same against arguably the best defensive unit personnel-wise in the National Football League. This team also has had its woes so far this season, protecting the passer and keeping Ryan Tannehill clean in the pocket. What does that mean? I think the Titans might fall down early in this game. I think they're going to struggle to develop a strong rushing attack and maybe go down 14, even 17 points early in this contest. If that happens, the Rams, Leonard Floyd, newly acquired Von Miller, Aaron Donald, are pinning their ears back, and they know you're going to pass the football. They're coming, they're going to rush the passer, and they are going to put a lot of hits on Ryan Tannehill. A.J. Brown's a deep threat wide receiver. He's already going to be seeing coverage from Jalen Ramsey, one of the team's top corners, or one of the league's top corners, rather. And you're just starting to stockpile reasons why the Titans could potentially fail and fail disastrously here in Week 9. When you've got one of the top corners in the league covering you, it already makes you a little bit of a less attractive option for your quarterback to throw the football to because he's not going to want to throw interceptions and give the football away. But then when you become one-dimensional because you can't run the ball at such an effective rate, again, because I think the transition in general is going to be tough, and then because the Rams are a solid defensive unit, it becomes that much tougher. I don't like this Tennessee situation at all here in Week 9. Give it a week to sort out the kinks. I think there's going to be a lot of ugly football from this team here. AJ does have the talent and the potential to make one big splash play downfield or potentially just be locked in on by Tannehill and to put up numbers. But again, if Ramsey shadow covers him, there's going to be less separation here, a lot more, or I should say a lot less room for error in this offense. And I think that it's just going to be a woeful performance for the Titans. So those of you who have the deepest of wide receiver cores, I think that I would go a different option from A.J. Brown this week. But if you got him in your lineups, heavy bust alert. Be warned. I think there's a chance this could go very, very wrong, and I would try and stay clear if possible. He's a lower-end wide receiver 2 for me this week. Alrighty, those are my 5 must-sit wide receivers here in Week 9 action. If you've got questions, you can put those down in the comment section below, and we'll get back to as many of you as possible. But with that being said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.